It's finally here, the next step up from the wildly popular Toyota RAV4 Hybrid. This is a 2021 Toyota RAV4 Prime. What it is a plug-in hybrid version of the RAV4. So in addition to the hybrid powertrain under the hood, you also get extended EV range. Toyota claims up to 42 miles of pure EV, and if you keep this thing charged up to 94 MPGe. But it comes at a massive, massive premium. $10,000 more than the RAV4 Hybrid.
Before incentives.
So, is it worth your cash? Let's find out. The RAV4 Prime's interior is excellent. Because this is an XSE premium model, you have leather everywhere, padded soft touch surfaces, the upgraded 8-inch infotainment screen, JBL audio, heated and ventilated leather seats, heated rear seats, automatic high beams, heated steering wheel, and of course, Toyota Safety Sense, the company's suite of active and passive safety aids, including lane keep assist, radar guided cruise control, automatic collision braking. The list of features truly goes on and on in this car, and it's so well contented you'll never be hurting for more stuff. But, and there is a big but, not everything in here is perfect. While you do have niceties like this panoramic glass roof and wireless charging, this infotainment display, this is the upgraded model, it still isn't that great. It works fine, don't get me wrong, but it's just not quite as premium or pretty to work with as something like the new Subaru Starlink setup. This has been in Toyota vehicles for a couple years now, and I suspect an update is definitely on the way, but it's a nitpick, but it's not the best. While I have you guys in here, let's talk about some more EV tech that's kind of exclusive to the Prime. If you look down here, there are a bunch of buttons. The first is this knob. It controls the drive mode. There's Eco, Normal, and Sport. And obviously that controls the weight of the steering, the throttle response, things like that. But in front of it are two really important buttons. There's a button to the left that says Auto, and a button to the right that toggles between HV, hybrid vehicle, and EV, electric vehicle. Basically, if you're driving the Prime around and you want to just drive it like a regular hybrid, you can push this button and put it in HV mode. However, if you're like, well, I have the range to get where I'm going, I want to drive purely EV 100% the rest of the way, push the button again, and you're now in EV mode. Definitely something to keep in mind while you're driving this thing around is to push the buttons and really see what they do and how they work for you. While we're talking about charging, let's talk about how you charge this thing. This XSE premium model actually comes with an upgraded charger in the trunk. It's a fast charger that, if need be, can charge you up from 0 to full in under an hour. Piece of cake. However, for most of you, like me, I suspect you won't be using any sort of advanced charging infrastructure at your home or apartment. Instead, you'll be relying on a wall plug, a regular outlet. And in that case, for those curious, to go from 0 to a full 42-mile charge takes about 12 hours, which is pretty standard for any sort of electrified vehicle. You know, you get a rate of about 3 to 4 miles of charge per hour. Perhaps unsurprisingly, driving the RAV4 Prime feels a lot like driving the RAV4 Hybrid. After all, the engine under the hood is the same basic deal, and the only key difference is obviously the battery packs, which are tucked away under the rear seat and the trunk. Power jumps massively from 219 in the Hybrid to a huge 302 in this RAV4 Prime. Toyota is very happy to announce in all their press literature that this is the second fastest vehicle in their entire model lineup, second only to the Supra in the 0 to 60 Sprint, which they claim happens in 5.7 seconds, which is truly ridiculous. Having battery capacity 11 times greater than the RAV4 Hybrid at 18 kilowatt hour versus the standard 1.6 kilowatt hour pack in the RAV4 Hybrid, this thing just has a lot of juice. Like any electrified powertrain, the power comes on immediately, quickly, smoothly, and quietly. Tap the gas and go. I mean, I scared all the safety systems though. The automatic collision braking came on. But it's true, this thing feels immediate, but it's also, I cannot overstate how smooth this setup is. Even when it transitions from the electrified powertrain to the gasoline engine, other than some minor noise from the engine up front, there's no jerk or sensation of it switching over between the different powertrain configurations. It's seamless and clever. But about that range and about that MPG, you must be wondering, can this thing really do near as makes no difference 100 MPGe in the real world? Well, yes, but there's absolutely an asterisk to that figure. You see, MPGe stands for miles per gallon equivalent. It's a bit of fuzzy math we use in the industry to kind of calculate what an electrified powertrain can do relative to a gasoline-powered vehicle. If you want to know more about how this works and how any sort of electrified powertrain and all the numbers work, I made a video on this before. I'll put a link in the annotation above. But back to the RAV4 Prime itself. You see, this car is so fascinating to me because so many people keep asking about it, and I totally understand why. If you look at the stats, it's a total blowout. The RAV4 Prime has the most pure EV mileage of any plug-in hybrid ever made, ever, irrespective of price point. That's super commendable on Toyota's part. If you look at pretty much every other plug-in hybrid, whether it's something like the Kia Niro PHEV or the Subaru Crosstrek or the Mitsubishi Outlander, or even if you go way up and look at like the Volvo XC60 T8 Polestar, no matter where you look, none of these plug-in hybrids are getting nearly as much range as you can get out of the Toyota. So kudos to Toyota for that. But what does it mean in the real world? Well, I have a few anecdotes for you because I only have this car for a week to test it, so I have to try and do as much as I possibly can with it in a week. And the other day, I decided to do a 120-mile freeway journey with the RAV4. That's driving from LA, where I live, down to South Orange County and back, stopping along the way to run some errands. And before I left, I forgot to charge this thing up all the way, so I only had about 25 miles of pure EV range. What happened? Well, for the first 25 miles or so, I was getting near as makes no difference infinite MPG because the gasoline engine only kicked on for maybe 15 to 30 seconds the whole time. But once that pure electric range runs out, your RAV4 Prime suddenly turns into more or less a regular RAV4 Hybrid. So not only is the incredible power suddenly diminished because a RAV4 Hybrid makes around 219 horsepower relative to 302, but so too is the fuel economy because it basically goes from getting infinite MPG down to about getting 40 to 50, which while still excellent is not exactly the near as 100 figure people keep talking about. But over the course of that journey, overall, I averaged 60 miles to the gallon, which is still excellent, even factoring in that limited range. A few days later, I charged this thing up all the way. My goal was to see how accurate that 42 miles of pure EV range actually was. So with the RAV4 Prime in EV mode and me doing pure EV mileage, I set off. I started out around town, driving between 25 to 45 miles an hour. Then I hopped on the freeway. Then I hopped off the freeway and did more around town driving, around 24 to 45 miles an hour. Then I hopped back on the freeway. So on and so forth. I tried to alternate the way I was driving the car, where I was driving the car, and how I was driving the car, until I ran out of range. And in the end, I just made it back to where I live. I did a full loop. I ended up getting 47 miles of pure EV range. The EV driving ratio gauge, which is right here in the middle, said I was at 97% pure EV driving. That basically means the gasoline engine was only kicking on for a few seconds at a time to kind of keep things charged up and happy. Because, you know, I was running my ventilated seats and my air conditioning and my radio and all that stuff. And so the gasoline engine does have to kick on periodically to kind of keep that stuff happy. So it's actually been my experience that in the real world, this thing can actually slightly exceed the claimed pure EV range, which is excellent because, you know, that's just more time spent driving on electricity and getting infinite MPG, near as makes no difference. Though obviously, as my cautionary tale shows, it's going to be up to you to do a bit of the legwork. You see, if you do a lot of around town driving and keep this thing charged up, it's entirely possible you'll barely, if ever, use the gasoline engine. However, if you do take these longer freeway journeys, and once you use that pure EV range up, you're kind of just relying on what is effectively a fancy RAV4 Hybrid underneath to carry you the rest of the way. Sure, there's absolutely zero range anxiety because you have a gasoline engine at the end of the day, but if you're expecting these mega MPG numbers all the time with no effort, that's just not really what a plug-in hybrid can do. And keep in mind, this is, by the numbers, the best plug-in hybrid money can buy. And I say all of this in a long-winded way to give you great detail about how I've been driving this car, because it explains the real-world MPG I'm seeing out of this thing. Now, don't worry, for the numbers nerds out there, just like the RAV4 Hybrid video I did last year, I will absolutely be taking this thing to the gas station at the end of this video, filling it up and calculating the real-world mileage. But for now, the trip computer says that overall, I've averaged 65 MPG, which, while excellent by any standard, is not the 94 MPGe people may think this thing will get. And again, that's just a fact of life with any sort of plug-in hybrid like this. Could you, in theory, get hundreds of miles per gallon if you just drive around town and keep this thing charged up? Sure, you absolutely could. But if you do longer journeys and you run out of electricity, well, this is what happens. The numbers drop down to more reasonable levels. So I'll come back to real-world MPGs in a second when we stop at the gas station and fill this thing up. But let's talk about some other RAV4 isms. After all, this has to work as a car at the end of the day. And actually, this is the best RAV4 yet, simply because of the addition of a couple 100 pounds of hybrid electric batteries in the floor of this thing have actually made this the quietest RAV4 you can possibly get. By adding that weight nice and low in the body of the car, it actually sort of dampens road noise and tire noise that I complained about in the RAV4 Hybrid. It also helps that despite the slick 19-inch wheels that come on this car, it rides great. It's super, super comfy. Even on LA's worst stretches of roads, which, my God, they are getting so bad. Sure, it's a bit pricey. It starts at around $39,000, and this fully loaded RAV4 Prime XSE Premium with options is almost $49,000, which is more than the Subaru Crosstrek plug-in hybrid, the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid. The list goes on, but it has more stuff and more EV range, and it looks really cool. And so when you factor everything in, it just makes sense. If you have the cash, why would you not go for this?
Of course, we have to talk about incentives like I mentioned at the beginning of this video. While the nearly $50K price tag may seem scary, at least in California, you can apply for up to $8,500 worth of rebates because it is a plug-in hybrid. Now, depending on where you live, the amount of incentives you can get varies. Check Toyota's website for more information on this, but it absolutely makes this way more appealing once you factor in that price differential.
All right, everyone, I think it's about time for me to pull off the road here and take some pretty pictures of the RAV4 Prime. I'll get back to you in a minute, and we're going to stop at the fuel station so we can figure out what the actual real-world MPG of this car is with me behind the wheel. So, I'll see you guys in a second. And the numbers are in on the 2021 Toyota RAV4 Prime. After 299.6 miles of driving, I used 4.876 gallons of fuel for a real-world MPG number of 61.5 MPG. Super impressive numbers for this large family SUV. Worth noting, that's 21 MPG more than the RAV4 Hybrid I drove last year. So, is that 10 grand extra worth it? Well,
if you can act fast and get all the incentive money, it's a no-brainer. Check out the RAV4 Prime.